Hey there, folks. Clyde Chester here. And tonight, I want to tell you about the most prosperous Black community in American history. A place so successful, so vibrant, so economically powerful that it was called the Black Wall Street of America. I'm talking about the Greenwood District of Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the years before 1921, before the massacre that destroyed it became what everyone remembers. But tonight, we're not starting with the destruction. We're starting with the dream, with the building, with the extraordinary achievement of Black Americans who created something magnificent in the face of overwhelming racism and legal segregation. This is the story of what Greenwood was before the ashes, and why understanding that matters just as much as remembering what was lost. Let me take you back to the 1890s, to the raw frontier territory that would become Oklahoma. This was Indian territory, land that had been promised to Native American tribes after they were forcibly removed from their ancestral homes in the Southeast, the Trail of Tears and all that followed. But even that promise was being broken. The federal government was preparing to open Indian territory to white settlement, and there was this brief window, this moment of possibility, where the rules weren't quite set yet, where the usual structures of segregation and oppression hadn't been fully established. And into this moment came Black Americans. Thousands of them, many of them formerly enslaved people or children of enslaved people, who saw in Oklahoma territory a chance to build something different. They'd been shut out of economic opportunity in the South, where Jim Crow was tightening its grip. They'd been shut out in the North, where racism was less legally codified but still brutally effective at keeping Black people poor and powerless. But Oklahoma was being born, and maybe, just maybe, they could build something there before the door slammed shut. Among those who came to Oklahoma was a man named O.W. Gurley. He arrived in 1905, and he had a vision. Gurley had worked as a teacher and a government employee, and he'd managed to save some money. Not a fortune, but enough. When he got to Tulsa, he bought 40 acres of land on the north side of town, in an area that white Tulsans didn't want because it was across the railroad tracks from the main business district. Gurley looked at that land and saw opportunity. He subdivided it and sold parcels exclusively to Black people, creating what would become the foundation of the Greenwood District. Gurley opened a rooming house and a grocery store on Greenwood Avenue, the main street that would give the district its name. And then he started recruiting. He went to other Black professionals, Black entrepreneurs, Black families with money or skills or ambition, and he told them, "Come to Tulsa, buy land here, build businesses here. We're going to create something special." And people came. They came from across Oklahoma, from Texas, from Arkansas, from Louisiana, from all over the South. They came with dreams of owning their own businesses, their own homes, their own futures. What they built over the next 15 years was nothing short of extraordinary. By 1921, Greenwood had grown into a thriving business district that stretched for over 30 blocks. Greenwood Avenue itself, Deep Greenwood people called it, was packed with Black-owned businesses. We're talking about grocery stores, restaurants, clothing stores, movie theaters, hotels, doctor's offices, law firms, newspaper offices, photography studios, pool halls, nightclubs, barbershops, beauty salons, funeral homes, and more. There were luxury shops selling high-end goods, professional services that rivaled anything in white Tulsa, entertainment venues that drew crowds from across the region. Let me give you some specific examples, because the scale and sophistication of what existed in Greenwood needs to be understood. There was the Dreamland Theater, a massive movie palace that seated 750 people and showed the latest films. There was the Williams Building, a 3-story structure that housed offices, retail shops, and a confectionery. Think about that, a 3-story commercial building in a Black neighborhood in Oklahoma in 1920. There were 2 newspapers, the Tulsa Star and the Oklahoma Sun, both Black-owned and operated, covering news from the Black community and providing a voice that white newspapers ignored. J.B. Stratford owned the Stratford Hotel, a 54-room luxury hotel that was one of the largest Black-owned buildings in the country. It had a dining room, a saloon, a billiard room. It was first class all the way. Dr. A.C. Jackson was a surgeon so skilled that the Mayo brothers, yes, those Mayo brothers from the famous Mayo Clinic, called him the most able Negro surgeon in America. He had a thriving practice in Greenwood, treating both black and white patients, and he'd built a beautiful home in the neighborhood. Simon Barry ran the Barry Hotel and the family jitney bus service, which was basically an early taxi company. Lula Williams owned a confectionery and also the Williams Building I mentioned. Mabel B. Little ran the Little Rose Beauty Salon and was one of the first black women in Oklahoma to get a beautician's license. O.W. Gurley, who'd started it all, owned multiple properties and businesses by the 1920s. These weren't just people scraping by. These were entrepreneurs, professionals, business people who were building wealth and legacy. And here's what made Greenwood especially powerful economically. The dollar circulated within the community. This is crucial to understand. In most black communities in America, money flowed out quickly because black people had to shop at white stores, use white services, rent from white landlords. But in Greenwood, because of segregation and because of the density of black-owned businesses, a dollar might change hands a dozen or more times before leaving the community. You'd get paid by a black employer, spend your money at a black-owned grocery store. That grocer would buy supplies from another black businessman who'd hire black workers who'd spend their money at black-owned restaurants and shops. The money circulated, multiplied, built wealth collectively. They called it Black Wall Street because of this concentration of black wealth and economic power. By some estimates, there were over 600 black-owned businesses in Greenwood by 1921. The district had 2 schools, including Booker T. Washington High School, which was actually better equipped than white schools in some ways because the black community invested heavily in education. There were churches, lots of churches, because the black church was and is the center of black community life. There were social clubs, fraternal organizations, a YMCA, a public library. Greenwood wasn't just a business district, it was a complete self-sufficient community. The wealth in Greenwood was visible and tangible. People built substantial homes, some of them mansions by any standard. They drove nice cars. In 1921, there were more black-owned automobiles per capita in Greenwood than in most white neighborhoods in America. People dressed well, ate well, sent their kids to college. There were black doctors and lawyers and teachers and business people who lived better than most white Americans of that era. And this was all happening in 1920 in Oklahoma, in the heart of Jim Crow America, where black people were supposed to be poor and subservient and powerless. Now, I need to be clear about something. Life in Greenwood wasn't perfect, wasn't utopian. This was still 1920s Oklahoma. Segregation was the law. Black people couldn't eat at white restaurants, couldn't stay in white hotels, couldn't use white bathrooms or water fountains. They couldn't vote in many cases. Oklahoma had effectively disenfranchised most black voters through poll taxes and literacy tests and grandfather clauses. The Ku Klux Klan was active and powerful in Oklahoma, and racial violence was a constant threat. But what black Tulsans had done was turn segregation's lemons into lemonade, or at least tried to. If white society was going to force them into their own neighborhood, deny them access to white businesses, then fine, they'd build their own economy, their own institutions, their own prosperity. They'd prove that given even a small chance, black Americans could build something extraordinary. Greenwood was a rebuke to every racist ideology that claimed black people were inferior, that they couldn't handle freedom, that they needed white paternalism to survive. And white Tulsan noticed. How could they not? Here was this thriving black community right across the tracks, this visible testament to black capability and success. For some white people, it was threatening. It challenged their assumptions, their sense of racial superiority, their comfort with the social order that put them on top. For others, it was useful. Black domestics and workers who lived in Greenwood came across the tracks every day to work in white homes and businesses, providing cheap labor that white Tulsa depended on. The relationship between black Greenwood and white Tulsa was complex and tense. There was economic interdependence. White businesses needed black workers and consumers. Black businesses sometimes needed white suppliers and capital. But there was also deep racial animosity, fear, and resentment. White Tulsans resented black prosperity, resented seeing black people driving cars and wearing fine clothes and living in nice houses. It violated the racial hierarchy they believed in, the natural order where white was superior and black was inferior. By 1921, Greenwood was at its peak. The district was home to more than 10,000 people, maybe as many as 11,000, a significant percentage of Tulsa's total black population of 15,000. The businesses were thriving, people were optimistic about the future. Young people growing up in Greenwood saw possibilities that their parents and grandparents couldn't have imagined. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, a business owner, a professional, not just in theory, but in practice. You could see it every day, walking down Greenwood Avenue, seeing black people who'd made it, who'd built something. And the community had institutions that supported it and sustained it. The churches weren't just places of worship. They were community centers, political organizing spaces, sources of social services and mutual aid. When someone needed help, the church stepped up. When there was a cause to support or an injustice to fight, the church mobilized people. Men like Reverend R.A. Whitaker at Mount Zion Baptist Church were community leaders whose influence extended far beyond religious matters. The schools were sources of immense pride. Booker T. Washington High School had excellent teachers, many of them college-educated black professionals who couldn't find better-paying work elsewhere and who poured their